Mamma mia, it's windy out there. Time to settle down with a tasty drop. Limited Release 34 is a European-style Pilsner brewed with German Pilsner malt, including Italian-grown barley, and a blend of German and Czech hops. In the modern Italian style, this beer is also lightly hopped, bringing yuzu, red berry, and subtle spice notes to complement the bready malt character and snappy bitterness. Bello. Take two. We're back, chatting about the place of film and architecture. After our last episode with Simon and Claire, we had heaps of feedback and some interest from a couple of architectural filmmakers from across the ditch. This episode, Veeral Patel, aka Mr. Veeral, and Nikolas Struger from Ravens at Odds join us to unpack how film can deepen our understanding and relationship to architecture. Thoroughly enjoyed this chat and the opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into a topic, especially with a different lens. Let's dive back in. Thanks for joining us, Nick and Veeral. It's not often we get listeners writing in to say that they want to continue the conversation. So it was really exciting when both of you guys wrote in last time saying, great chat, but we want to kind of continue things and look at it from probably more of a filmmaker's lens and maybe even a longer format lens. So for those out there that don't know your work, do you guys want to quickly give a brief introduction to yourselves before we jump into the chat?
Hi, so I'm a Melbourne-based photographer and filmmaker. So my original background was in software engineering and had a midlife crisis, changed careers, took up cycling photography. From that, I met a bunch of architects who started feeding me a lot of work in architecture. And I suddenly moved from shooting bike races in Europe to shooting architecture in Melbourne. And because of COVID, I decided to pick up filmmaking. And that has been a very interesting career transition in my arc because it has allowed me to learn a whole heap of new skills and the way you approach creativity as well.
Shooting bikes into shooting architecture seems quite a common jump. I feel Simon and Devitt might have done the same, and we've got a friend who Gerard and I went to university with, Logan Sweeney, who he kind of did architecture and now shoots ski jumping and cycling. But I don't know why they seem intrinsically involved, but they seem to be.
I'm a former cyclist as well, so yeah, it all checks it. But yeah, so I'm a former architect turned architectural filmmaker, I guess. So I run a production and branding company called Ravens at Odds here in Brisbane. And we're working like day in, day out within the architecture industry. But I guess I started in architecture and then I jumped out, moved around the world, did a whole bunch of different things, explored different interests from graphic design to music production, web design, marketing, live sound, probably farming or something as well when I was living overseas, all sorts of different things kind of, in that arc of kind of figuring out what you want to do when you grow up. And at some point along the way, kind of came back to architectural practice, but not as an architect, working in more of a production and communications role. At some point, I had this idea that I wanted to make films about architecture, which I guess was a way to pull in a whole lot of interests and influences that I had personally, but to bring it back into the profession that I was passionate about and so heavily involved in throughout my life. And yeah, since 2020, have been making films full time about architecture.
Awesome. How long were you practicing?
Probably not as long as I could have. I practiced throughout my undergrad and masters, and then worked for about probably 4 or 5 years after that before kind of taking off overseas. And then I came back to practice for about 5 years, but that was not as an architect at that point, as I was saying. But throughout that period, I've been working adjacent to architecture the whole time. So it's something I kind of love and understand.
Yeah, that perspective would help a lot, wouldn't it?
Mm.
I wonder if a lot of it is some of what you do sort of in response to things that raised whilst you were practicing. Maybe things weren't being presented in a way that you thought they could or something.
Yeah, definitely. I think I formed a whole lot of ideas whilst I was in practice, either as an architect or as whatever other role I had, particularly around communication and storytelling. And that was probably a realization that I came to quite recently, was that at the core, that's the thing that I'm quite interested in, is telling stories, whether that's like a bigger kind of, more encompassing thing about architecture and the world and life, or whether it's I suppose a more commercial thing of just kind of helping a brand or a practice communicate their story or their ethos or something. But I've kind of looked back on my career across different fields and been able to see that that's the common thread, whether it's telling stories through graphic design or through text or websites or whatever. That's always that thread that's been there. So that, I guess it's a thing that interests me quite a lot. And it's a thing that's like so intimately entwined with filmmaking.
Interesting reading both your guys' sort of bios. I did a bit of research, went all pro on this. But you both really highlight that, the narrative side in the work that you do. And it's interesting that you both have come to this not later in life. I'm not saying that you guys are old, but it wasn't like first stop career point of view. And you kind of both have come at it from different perspectives, but obviously with that narrative in focus. And Gerard, like what you were saying was Nick's response to moving into film, reaction, I guess, to not issues, but maybe shortcomings within the industry. Do you feel that we as architects or the architectural community doesn't portray the narrative that well? Because I always find as a designer, while you're designing, you're generating a narrative in your head, right? What you're building needs it to be successful ultimately. But then there's almost a disconnect of what you imagine and maybe what you try and encourage your clients or in the way that they use the building to do. And then the general public's absorption of that or like their own use. Like, is that something that you are looking to bridge, that gap?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things to unpick there, because there's those narrative ideas probably across a whole series of domains within architecture. Definitely, I've seen things that we probably don't do well enough as a profession and could get better at, and that's one of the things that I'm kind of interested in doing whilst working with practices. But I think we quite often we don't communicate a whole range of different things in the right way to the right people. I think too often we're thinking about architects communicating with architects, and like there's that disconnect between architect and client or architect and general public. And I think that, like if we get that right, there's a whole lot of benefits. There's commercial benefits to your practice, but there's industry and professional benefits and, much more far-reaching benefits to communities and things as well. So yeah, we could dive into each one of those things, I guess.
Yeah.
We're pretty good at preaching to the choir, aren't we, architects?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was about to say like that architect to architect thing it's almost a reason why we started the podcast in a way, is because so much of this content that we as architects create and all of the publications, award systems and everything that we like really strive to achieve in or, be recognized in are essentially just a giant circle jerk. We're not promoting it that well to the general public. And it's how do we change that in a way? And it sounds like you guys are looking at mechanisms to do so, which is really interesting.
I don't think there's anything wrong with like architects talking to architects. We've got to have that kind of basis in the profession.
Of course.
There's other things as well.
Yeah, I think it's just, we can obviously talk to each other and that conversation is really important. But when it's like totally insular, I think it starts to become not necessarily a problem, but we kind of get caught in our own world far too much. And when ultimately the people that we're looking to serve is everybody, not ourselves.
Yeah, lots of buzzwords.
Yeah.
Veeral, how do you sort of see longer form film sort of helping communicate this architectural void between architects and the world?
Nick comes from an architectural background, so he can sort of understand both realms really well. But I come from a creative perspective. So for me, the way I sort of see photography, like film over photography, is that you can show the process a lot more clearly. So, for example, I had worked on a project with a studio last year, and it was just a small fit out, but there were just so many things happening in this fit out that the video just captured it so well. And it was an interview with the lead interior designer. But, you can actually sandwich in not the drawings, but just showing what the process looked like during construction and showing that together with the finished product, right?
It's interesting that you're capturing the process, because I think that's something we touched on very, very briefly in that last conversation. Was we really champion that finished product, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of content within the process, and actually almost the richer content is the process, and that's where the deep understanding comes from. So is that something that you look to do with a lot of your work, or is that just a one-off case?
And I'll look at doing that as well, but it's like how you tie everything together, right? So at the moment, like the issue I face is with these, what do we call these content producers? They run into a building site just, with a gimbal, and they quickly show what's happening, but you don't get to really understand what's actually happening. So you have a drone fly over and all these things, and it's just very flashy. And what is it that you're trying to show to the end user who's going to commission you to either design and build your space? And it just becomes very flamboyant, and it's just not addressing what architecture is all about and how an architect and a builder work together.
How's that sort of worked out, perhaps in that previous project you're talking about? How did you come to that conclusion? Because that kind of requires you to be early in on the project, as opposed to a lot of the film about projects is very post-rationalized. It's here, we've got this nice building. Was the client coming to you wanting that early, the whole narrative, or was that you going to
So
them?
initially, okay, so for this particular project, like the client was made for studio, like a small studio. They're very highly nimble. And they said, look, we want to capture some of the process of what's happening on site just to update as to what this project is doing. And then they wanted a end video just to show the project. Because the space was so small, it was hard to kind of show the end product to take up the full 90 seconds that we had allowed. So that's why sandwiching in the process, drawings, an interview, and showing, you can do that really effectively in 90 seconds. And the thing is, if you're going to use it on Instagram, you can't show long form content, right? You got to either take them to your own website and host it and show that. But on Instagram, short form always wins. And the speed of it wins as well, like how you put everything together. If it's going to be slow and drawn out, you're going to lose viewership.
Is that something, I mean, that you can already see the conversation starts to spread, right? The social media aspect of it. I mean, is that something that you guys still look to target, or do you feel that it's not a rich enough, there's not enough time, like you said, to actually tell a proper story within that format, and you're actually trying to maybe give people a taste, but pull them to, whether it be a Vimeo channel or YouTube or your own website, like you said. Like, is that the goal, or is the goal to cover all bases?
From my experience, the goal has been to cover all bases, right? And definitely you can create like a what do you call a cut down of your video and share on Instagram just to gauge the interest and to show the interest and to show what's coming along the pipeline, and then take them to your website. But it's just like, how do you go from Instagram to your website, right? That's always a challenge because you can't click links on your Instagram app.
Yeah, they're pretty disconnected, really, which we've found. I mean, Nick, you probably know this from like the brand side of things.
Mhm.
They're all completely two different entities, really, and you have to treat them as such. And that's why the film thing is, I guess, and why we're having this conversation, such a broad topic, because I think when we think of film, we probably think of clips, short, like 6 second, 90 second being probably long format in the social media aspect. And then nothing in between to maybe like a local project, 10 to 15 minute project overview, to almost nothing beyond that, bar feature films, which often are not about a building and often more about an architect or an architect's body of work or something. Do you find that there is scope, and is that an interest in you guys to try and maybe fill those time voids between those sort of three key aspects, or do you think that that's enough that canvases it? I guess what I'm trying to lead to is, why is there not like a 20-minute, half-hour TV show series, not in the vein of Grand Designs, that focuses more on architecture? Because I imagine it'd be good. It would be good viewing.
I think maybe architecture is such a niche thing in a way that there may not be viewership for that, and maybe that's why Grand Designs is popular, because it is kind of dramatized and it is targeting more of a broad audience. I mean, I think you could probably find an architectural film in lengths from 15 seconds all the way through to an hour and a half in 5-minute increments. There'd be something, across the whole span. But whether there's a lot, it's true what you're saying. It's like there's the short form stuff, There's that medium kind of 5 to 10 minute stuff. And then there's like full length features, which is kind of a different thing again. I don't know. I mean, you could probably argue the same as for kind of any industry that engages with film as well. I think it's just to do with like how people are engaging with those different formats. I guess what I do as a filmmaker and what I do as a designer or content strategist, there's crossover, but they're two kind of different things as well. So with a filmmaking hat on, I'm thinking about story and narrative, and I'm thinking about how, like, the pacing of a film and how long it's going to be and how much we're trying to get in there. But from a kind of content strategy point of view, there's probably a few different things to consider there. For me, it's rarely about getting someone to watch the 15-second clip so that they can go to the website and watch the 10-minute clip, because most people don't do that. Most people are on social media scrolling. They want the quick dopamine hit, and that's fine. And I'm totally happy to engage with that. Like, I love doing 15, 20, 25-second cut downs. Like, I love editing in vertical as well. Like, I don't see it as an assault on my artistic process or anything like that. It's just another format. It's another way to tell a story. It's going to have a slightly different lens. It's going to have a different purpose, but they're all purposeful. They all serve a purpose. From a kind of content or marketing point of view, I guess it's like what we're doing on social media quite often is building social proof and trust and brand recognition for practices and companies. That can kind of sit separately to somebody watching a longer film. Like, not everyone's going to click off and go and see the longer one, but maybe there's a client who's quite interested in your work, someone that's, considering commissioning you, and they're going to move from your Instagram to your website and start doing a deeper dive. And that's when they'll uncover the longer things. And that's when, they can take the time and understand who the architect is, what the building's about, what the process is like a little bit deeper. I don't feel like the content needs to kind of bridge every gap and get every viewer to watch every length. But I think the longer format stuff is certainly interesting. Again, it's probably a different target audience though. Not every single person that's scrolling on Instagram is going to want to watch a hour and a half long film about architecture.
You touched on enjoying making the short stuff, but do you have a preference for length that you work with? Like, do you feel like there's a sweet spot for being able to really capture the essence of a project? Or you've already alluded to, you can kind of cover the basis in a myriad of ways?
Yeah, I think it depends what the story is, what you're trying to actually document or convey. If it's a snippet of a project, like, 15 seconds can deal with, one aspect of the space perhaps, or even just a very quick overview. If it's more of like a brand story, something that's more involved, or like a really big project that had a whole series of moving parts and different parties, and then probably a longer format thing with interviews probably works better. But I think it really comes down to what you're trying to do with the content, who you're talking to, and what the idea of like that particular story is really. So I don't think there's necessarily a sweet spot. There's lots of kind of best practice standards that we always draw on when we're going into these productions with clients, and we always, advise them what we think works best and what's going to suit their project or their idea, whatever it is best. But I think it changes from production to production.
Are you guys going in, commissioned by a client, architect, whoever? Are you guys storyboarding, planning this thing quite thoroughly? As kind of continuing on from that conversation, the last conversation where a lot of the moments were captured at the time, or like something caught somebody's eye and they captured it in that moment. Is that something that you guys do more of, or are you more focusing on, this is the building that we're going to capture, this is the narrative, or this is the story we're trying to tell, and creating a bit more of a framework to be able to deliver that?
So, I would say for me, I'm thoroughly prepared for that. So that's just part of the process. When I talk to a client who wants to commission me, like, I try and scope out what the project is, what they're trying to achieve, and from that, I will suggest an idea of what the video film should be based around. And then to get their buy-in, like storyboarding and creating what we call a treatment document, where you outline, okay, what the visual imagery will look like, where are your references coming from, what is the editing style, what is the color grade style, what is the sound design, what is the music reference going to be. Like, when you encapsulate all this in a document, you got to give your client some confidence in you that you'll be delivering an agreed upon vision,
Mm.
right? And like from that storyboard, you can then dissect, okay, if it's going to be a multi-day shoot, then how do you schedule out your shoot days as well? And, what time of the day you're going to shoot what part of the building.
How do you
So
go about
like,
developing that sort of initial story for your storyboard? Can you, a few tips, tricks,
you,
little window into a world?
like for me, I do a lot of site visits, right?
And
So
talk to the architect, like what they're trying to convey, or I don't know. I just
sure.
think,
So I can just talk about some of my previous projects, right? So
yeah,
the last big project I shot was called International. It was designed by Car, and I was commissioned by two developers, Landrum and Vleader. So, I mean, Landrum was the key client I was interfacing with, and they just gave me a set of requirements they wanted captured, and they knew from another agency about how I work, and they knew they were going to get something creative out of me, not your cookie cutter thing. And I sort of looked at some references I get my inspiration from, and it was just a matter of going to the site, seeing the apartment we're going to be shooting inside, and then seeing what's around the apartment in terms of, say, amenities, and deciding that, okay, for me, the way I like to create my visuals, it has to be either late in the evening or early in the morning. I don't do a lot of midday shots because I just want the quality of light that needs to be really manageable. Like, I don't like a lot of bright light in my work because it just sort of, when it comes to, say, editing it, I want to have enough data in my footage for the images to look beautiful.
yeah, golden hour.
So yeah, golden hour, early morning, midday, and then like for that particular project, I had a gaffer who's a lighting guy who will come, and we had to scrim out all the windows in the first thing in the morning. And for that, he needs information from me, what shot we're doing and how is it going to be looking like. So I'm already dialed in before going in that for this particular shot, I need this light to be here. I need, you need to black out these windows for me and do all that. So I know what the shot will look like. So there's just a lot of envisioning. Like, I have to envision in my head what the shot is going to look like. And, when you have, say, 25 shots to capture in a day, and you've got a whole team waiting on you, you need to be fairly dialed in, very dialed in.
Yeah,
It's a lot more involved than I
I feel like
expected.
it's way more extreme than just a photography project, which you're coming in with a narrative and a shot list.
It is, right? But the thing is, it's at the end of the day, it's your brain and your project, and who you engage matters, right? And for me, I'm not someone who's going to go, oh, hairy fairy, it's just whatever comes, I'll shoot, because
Yeah,
it's just uncomfortable,
and
and
then
you look like
together into some edit.
yeah, because then there's nothing cohesive. Right? So, like for that project, I had like a full post-production team working with me as well. So I had a colorist, a sound designer, and a composer. So, they need some pre-warning as to what I'm achieving, and they need information as well. So having everything dialed in, it makes their life easier as well.
It's interesting, and this is very much a film thing, I think. Filmmakers very much have maybe it's all visual art, to be fair. Everyone has a style. And I kind of see, the way that you're already speaking, Veeral, is like you have a very distinct style. And I've seen your work, and you do have a very distinct style. And I assume people that come to you for your style. Is there any instances where the building or the architecture doesn't feel like it would suit your style? Because I always feel like there could be sometimes a disconnect there.
I mean, look, sometimes things are not ready in a building too, right?
Yeah.
You got to work around it.
Yeah.
And there are times where, like for this particular project, I had to come back because the fireplace wasn't ready when we were shooting. And I needed in the lobby area the fire to be glowing because that was all part of the story as well.
Yeah, interesting.
So I had to come back at a separate day without my crew and just, eyeball that image in. And then
Nick,
hopefully in post they can fix it.
Yeah. Nick, do you work with a similarly scaled team? Like, that kind of blows my mind that, I mean, and it makes sense. It's a big production and the stuff that you guys, particularly when, and I assume, Veeral, what you're talking to is a longer format piece. You're not going to have that size team for 90 seconds, are you?
90
don't?
seconds.
Really?
I always do 90 seconds. Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, it works, right?
Yeah.
And the thing was, like, I only had 2 days to shoot everything in. And if I had more time, then sure, I'd love to do something a bit longer. But it's about what do you call the attention span?
That's your golden. That's your golden time stamp. 90
Yeah.
seconds.
90 seconds. That's all I work towards. And when you look at all the big ads, it's all 90 seconds.
Yeah,
Nice.
I suppose my process is a little bit more varied between productions. I would say that I'm prepared to the teeth every production. Like, I don't do anything without preparation, but that doesn't necessarily mean that every production, every single shot is planned out. Some productions are, but others, there's a lot of run and gun. A lot of my influence comes from documentary filmmaking, and I'm quite comfortable rocking up and like approaching it like a documentarian and kind of working out what's there. But that doesn't suit every production. So it depends what it is. So, I mean, we do a lot of short form content, like also bringing in the process of these things. So we're doing a lot of stuff with builders, architectural builders, where we're actually documenting their construction sites. And that stuff is me rocking up with a handheld camera and moving around and just capturing it in a couple of hours, working with natural light, no real direction, no storyboarding whatsoever. But that's a much smaller budget, quick turnaround kind of thing versus much more involved brand campaign films. One that I did recently up the Sunshine Coast, which was obviously a much bigger budget, but also a lot more planning, kind of like probably 6 months went into that before we actually got onto site. And that involved doing a treatment, doing a storyboard, working out what all the different scenes were going to be, coordinating with, I think, 6 different talent, and then basically putting that into a Google sheet, which was ordered by sequence based on the storyboard, but then could be reordered based on shooting sequence, because I knew that I wasn't going to shoot it in sequence it was going to have to be out of sequence, because there's so many different things to consider. I think there were like 5 or 6 different locations. There was some stuff we were shooting on a boat. Other stuff we were like trail running through the national park with cameras and lighting and doing things. There was like several different days at a house with different groups of talent. It was a project that I knew intimately, that I've filmed probably 4 or 5 times over the last 5 years. So I knew exactly where the sun came in at every moment. Like, I knew exactly which spaces would work at different times of day. So I was able to plan out, well, we're doing this thing down by the spa, and that's going to have to be at this time. We're going to be in this room inside, but I want to make sure that the outside's not blown out. So I knew that was going to be at a certain time. So it's like managing all these different things. And then it was a task in itself, just putting the schedule together, because I could reorder the spreadsheet based on sequence, like video sequence or shooting sequence. And so it's managing all those different things. So, that's not the kind of thing you can just rock up and do, especially when you've got all this talent and crew as well, because I had about 3 or 4 people with me for the production of that one. So that's not the kind of thing you can just rock up and just kind of wing it on the day. But that said, there's always improvisation. So even on a production where I have a full storyboard and a schedule down to 15-minute blocks, things never go to plan. Like, there's always going to be swapping things around because something happens, someone's late, or the light looks better here, or you see something happening on site that you want to capture and you want to adapt and be flexible with it.
Do you often get happy mistakes through that mechanism, or
all the time?
Yeah,
that's the beauty and the fun of it. Like, you're prepared with a schedule, you know exactly what you're going to do, but you've also got to be prepared to be totally unprepared and just like to react to what's going on there. Because there's always stuff that you can't plan for.
Yeah, I love that.
So these things sound monumental. Just trying to think like how many architecture firms are in a position to sort of commission something like that.
Or is it more developers and clients that are driving this? I mean, maybe we're just a bit small time, but
No. Look, I think like there's some really big budget stuff that like, sure, it's a lot more expensive than a photography production, but that's not to say that every architectural practice should invest 20, 30, 40 grand in a video. Like, quite often I would talk people out of doing that because it may not actually be necessary for what they're trying to achieve. It comes down to the practice that you're working with, what the intention of the video campaign is. Quite often it's maybe other brands or organizations, maybe developers as well, that are putting a bit more money into it. But But I've also had architectural practices, even small ones. I decide that it is worth spending the money on something because it's a particularly important project, something that they've put a lot of time into, and they want it done well, or they want it done in a way that's not just the kind of cookie cutter thing that most content producers would turn up and do. So, you know, they want the nuance of the project captured. They want the feeling of the project captured, the experience of the project. And that sometimes does take a bit more time.
Maybe it's in New Zealand, but I feel like a lot of, myself included, we probably undervalue the strength of marketing and the buying power of actually investing in good photos. I mean, film, I think, clearly works a lot more effectively at spreading a message than photographs.
Both are important. They both do different things.
In New Zealand, I'd say that we don't, from an architectural profession point of view, like we don't embrace film enough. I would say, like, I can't think of many architectural practices of any scale really that regularly have films produced to their work at all. Whereas I feel like
a YouTube channel.
Yeah, internationally, you do. There you go. Gerard Dombrowski, number one. Whereas internationally, I feel like it's a little bit more prevalent. Would you guys agree? I mean, I don't know if you've done much work here versus just in Australia or internationally, but I feel it's maybe a shortcoming from our profession here is that we don't value or don't recognize the value in film as much as we probably should. And I think that's something that I was trying to tease out in the last conversation was I feel like that shift has happened and we're maybe towing the line a little bit on it.
I feel like Veeral's foaming at the bit for something to say, so I'll let him.
Yeah.
Sorry, so I'll tell you this. Back in 2018, I came to Auckland and I actually caught up with Andrew Mitchell from Patterson Associates. And they were talking about I wanted to come and shoot because they do really beautiful work, and I really wanted to come and shoot one of their projects. And we started talking about video work, and he was one of the first architects to actually encourage me to get into video.
Oh, there you go.
So the thing is,
did he shoot any? Did he get you to shoot any video though?
No, I haven't.
There you go.
In a world where design speaks louder than words, what story does your space tell? At Ortex Acoustics, they believe great design is more than aesthetics. Every product they create strikes a perfect balance between form, function, and sustainability, made to enhance how a space sounds, looks, and feels. From using recycled materials to pioneering carbon-negative wool, their commitment is to help you shape environments that inspire people and respect the planet. Explore the future of acoustics design at ortexacoustics.co.nz.
But the thing is, like, what I tell my clients is that, okay, I mean, like for me, I can photograph architecture really well and I can shoot videos. And I can do both, but I can't do both in one day. It's just impossible, right? So why compromise your projects? You know, either you go for spectacular or you go for mediocre. And if you
Sell the dream, Veeral.
it is the truth. But like the thing is, like when I'm on photo shoots, it's just balls to the wall. It's full gas. You can't even think about, oh, there's a light changing here. Let's just get the curtain blowing. It's like no time. You just gotta, like some of the architecture shoots I've been on. You finish one room, the stylist assistant is packing everything up because the truck's going to come in the afternoon and pick everything up, and off it goes back to the showroom.
Further that, I chat with Lisa where she said she had amazing reception to a video that NZAA did on her, which was it about a particular project?
I think it was 90 seconds. Yeah.
And I feel like those videos that are quite engaging and have real narrative. I just think the story is king, and the more you can bring a story into thing, the more people love it. That's why I'm super into that idea, Veeral, of you getting on the construction site and showing footage from construction and all the way through. Like, if you could have these all micro, 90-second little construction through to completion, like, I think it's captivating to watch. Sit there staring at your screen, scrolling, and then you're seeing construction, bam, 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 finished. That must be like a pretty
the thing is, like,
epic thing to see.
The way I say is, like, story can take many forms, right? Like you can do the client process thing, or so quite a number of years ago, like back in 2021, like Milan Design Week normally happens in April, and that year I believe it happened in September, October because of all the lockdown issues. So Molteni Dada, one of the top Italian furniture makers, they released a video called a short film called White Noise, 17 minutes long, and their products took a backstage, right? And when I saw that, it was just about this woman. She was at a junction in her life. She was getting ready to pick up an award that evening, and she gets an envelope, and an envelope was a tape, and it triggered her former life, former lover. And it was just a really nice way to show her dilemma with the furniture, and the furniture just played second fiddle. Like, that's another way of storytelling about
Like it does in
architecture.
real life.
Yeah, and this is something I would love to do in architecture. And recently, I had a chance to do something not similar to that, but there was another really amazing video done by nuance a few years ago called, I think it had the word bookworm in it. And it was just fascinating to see snippets of a house with people reading books, right? And a couple of months ago, this architect who lives around the corner from me, she is just working on a house for this 70-year-old woman. She designed her a 2-bedroom house made from rammed earth. And I got on site and I met the client, and she has traveled all over the world, right? And this design was influenced by her travels. And she's an avid book reader, and the amount of shelving the architect designed in the house was unbelievable. And as she spoke to me, and I just remember, and she was talking about this central courtyard. And she wanted this courtyard because it reminded of a garden she walked through in Kyoto. Now, so you imagine, right? Like you can show her walking across the courtyard and a flashback to a Japanese, a garden in Kyoto. And I think that's another form of storytelling. And what I wanted to do with that one was for her not to talk about how the house makes her feel, but talk about her travels and how it has influenced the house, but not mention the architecture in any shape or form.
It's an interesting mechanism. I like that approach where it's more about the client, because the architecture is a response to them and their life and their brief and their needs. And oftentimes we focus too much on the built form and not the story. It is interesting though, because I was looking at some of your guys' films as well, but a lot of the time it is focused on the built form, and the building's creating the narrative, and be that paired with a soundtrack. Do you have a preference, or do you think it's just a case by case thing where whether you have maybe a speaking track over the top, or the way that you form the story? I mean, probably, or at least the stuff that I was looking at, you tend more to the sort of audio dub music dub rather than actual storytelling.
That was one of the things that I think was missed in the last discussion, if this is the part 2 to the part 1, that this idea of storytelling and narrative being limited to something where there's somebody speaking, something textual, which I disagree with fundamentally. Like,
very one-dimensional.
Well, it's just narrative is inherent in so many things. Narrative and storytelling doesn't come down to somebody speaking about something. So there's visual storytelling, like, a painting tells a story, graphic design tells stories, music, listening to music, like that's a story as well. Like whether it's instrumental or vocal, whether it's music in another language that you can't even understand, there's still feelings and emotions and things that evoke ideas and responses in the listener. I come from a kind of musical background. I played in bands for years and have recorded and produced my own albums, either on my own or with other bands. So music and sound design is a very big thing for me. I actually wrote my master's thesis on architecture and music, or architecture and sound. That's a whole nother thing. I can get into that another time. But yeah, like music and sound is always a big thing. But I think it comes down to the production. So I did the film about a year ago with some friends, Red Hill House and Studio for Susanna and Nikolas Architects. And Nick and I had a band years ago when we were at uni together. But in that particular film, he's actually playing guitar. It starts off as off-screen music and then it becomes on-screen in a certain scene, which is a classic kind of narrative filmic trick. There's a scene where he puts on a record and it's one of his friends' records that are playing, and that becomes the overlay music in the scene as well. And then, there's other productions where we don't use music at all because we actually just want to focus on the natural sound or the ambient sound that's going on there. Yeah, but I think narrative and storytelling can happen in so many different ways. There's a lot of films that we do that there are people talking about a process or an idea, and there's other stuff where it is just kind of visual, where the building itself kind of becomes a character, or the people using the building become the characters that effectively tell the story about what this place feels like, what the day-to-day feels like in a building. So there's lots of different ways that you can tell stories and lots of different ways to create narrative.
Are you guys driving that decision, or is that more client driven? Or like, let's put the architect in the shoes of the client here in terms of getting you guys to make the film. Are they the ones? That's something that I kind of want to dive into. Are we the ones that are driving that narrative decision, whether that be the focus on the building, the focus on the process, the focus on the client, what have you, and then how much say are we having in what's being produced versus the reins being kind of handed over to you guys?
I think it's one of these things that vary from production to production. I work with a lot of clients, a lot of them repeat clients that we've worked with over the years who will come to me and just say, you tell us what we think we need,
Do your thing.
Yeah, kind of.
Nice.
And sometimes there's clients that say, well, we want you to do your thing, but we're thinking it's going to be this. We want to do some interviews and sit down and talk with the client. Or sometimes, you're working on productions where they're absolutely certain that they want a particular thing. So it varies from production to production, from client to client. What I always try to do, though, I guess, is give them some consultation and suggest what I think is going to work best for their needs as well. Because a lot of people see these kind of, let's call them medium format styles, where it's like a faux documentary where there's people sitting down talking about the project, whether that's architect, client, consultants, that kind of 5 to 10 minute format. And everyone sees that and it's very popular and everyone kind of wants to do that. And I quite often get a lot of clients coming saying, oh, we want a film that looks like one of these ones. And that's great. Like they're beautiful, but they're not always the best thing for that particular project or for that client or for what their intentions are, That's amazing if you've got a platform of millions of viewers that are going to sit down and watch it and are going to be dedicated to watching it. But that may not always be the case. And it's something that I talk about with my clients when we're getting into strategy is that like numbers, like just chasing numbers, chasing viewership is kind of the worst way to think about return on investment of a video. There's so many other ways that we can actually make a video work for a practice that has nothing to do with going viral or thousands of views.
That answered it perfectly. What I was looking for was how much, not say, but how much kind of directive we give through the process versus how much expertise you give back, which I always find, not that I've had video made, but you always feel when you're going in photography, say, you kind of have a picture in your head of what the shots might be and things like that. But ultimately, it's a little bit of a stick to your lane type situation because we often don't know.
Ideally, you'd probably pick a filmmaker like you'd pick an architect. Ideally,
exactly.
Going
that does come into
all their
play.
professional services, and you'd hope I don't know, if you're designing the film, there's probably something going wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We can come in with our vision, just the same as you as an architect could come in with your vision. But if you're not collaborating and working with your client, you might get a great sculpture that fulfills your own ideas, but it may not be the thing that fulfills their needs. And so I think it is a conversation and a collaboration. So, and if you're looking for guidance, I would say go into it with as much directive as you feel you want to, or as little, like whatever kind of feels right for you, I think.
Do you ever get disappointment when things have been chopped on the editing floor and clients come back and be like, but what about that part?
Disappointment from the clients or disappointment?
Yeah. Or either way.
Got to show the pen.
You can't fit everything into a clip, right? Or a video.
Yeah, that's right. There's usually got to be, some ruthless decisions that get made at some point. But I mean, that happens both ways. Not every project, not every production goes the way that I want it to go, but it's not about me and my ego. That's how sometimes the client wants a certain thing. And like, sometimes you've got to chalk it up and go, all right.
If we push the conversation a little bit towards longer form, what are we?
Yeah, sure.
The future of, or what do you guys want to do with sort of longer format? Oh, do you want to do? Are we talking film, architecture, movies, next Resine Film Festival?
Look, I would love to submit something to the film festival, right? And I would love to do some.
Half of them are rubbish, so you'll get in easy. New Zealand.
But like for me, the way my ideas are evolving, I need some sort of a narrative on top. Right? I can't do these plain pictures because now what I'm seeing is every architectural photographer wants to shoot a video and they're just doing pretty pictures. I can't be competing on that level. I need to go up and having a level of sophistication, having an idea, a thread that can support the architecture is what the example I gave with the white noise was super important. That's what I like. And I would love to create something on that level. Another good example is there's this British cycling brand called Rafa. Back in the day, they used to just do this really rough documentaries, right? It wasn't scripted at all. And one of my favorite episodes was when Ben Ingham went to Italy to shoot a video about a bike builder called Dario Pecoretti in Veneto. And it was just following Dario around his workshop and his home for a full day. And they made this into a 15-minute video, and it was amazing. Unfiltered, Dario swearing, Dario going off at his colleagues. And I would love some rawness like that, especially on a building site between an architect and a builder.
Yeah.
You should get into an architecture studio when we get questions from council or builders during the construction process and how much we cuss.
And fly us over the next time you've got a client meeting or a meeting with an engineer or whatever.
You'd love to be a fly on the wall sometimes.
I get quite opinionated, especially on architecture movies. A lot of the, we had one last night. It was the Schindler Space Architect. It was a really beautiful story, actually, and a story I didn't know too much about him. It was very long, but we go to a lot of these movie nights, and especially the Resine film ones, just a lot of the old architecture films, just very dry and very boring. It's like, this is a house, and now we're going to, this is another house, this is another house, and you're just like, the monopoly.
Very ponderous.
Whereas I always refer back to Ice Cube's Celebrate the Eames, a little 2-minute video where it's Ice Cube talking about the Eames house and just how punchy and direct. I just think there's so many different ways to skin a cat. Look at all the vast world of film we have, and then so much of architecture film is so dry and lacks any excitement or any storyline, any range of emotion. You're monotone. How do you bring some emotion or some intrigue, some excitement into film about architecture?
That's a question, I guess, that I'm grappling with at the moment, because I'm working on a longer format documentary about architecture, about a particular building. So a friend of mine is designing and building his own house up the Sunshine Coast. And it's something that we're documenting, like most of the stages throughout construction. It's something that I just go up every now and then, and when there's a kind of milestone or something happening on site that's particularly special or interesting or dramatic, we go there and try to capture it. And it's something that's going to evolve over several years, because it's already been a year of just site works, and they're still just getting posts out of the ground. I think bearers are coming on site, maybe a month.
That sort of forethought on a project is awesome. Like, I think so much of the architecture documentaries are post-rationalized, so you're scrounging for footage or you're listening to recordings overlaid on whereas if you're there getting footage all the way through is
Well, what we're trying to do with it as well is approach it like you would typically approach a documentary too, that we're documenting, but at some point we'll sit back and review the footage, and we'll actually start to think about what the narrative is, and we'll actually write a script, and we'll then actually pull the thing together and then work out what additional things we need to film. And we'll do little interviews with Tom, the architect, who's my mate, along the way, and also his partner, and I guess at some point their child when he's grown up, maybe, and he's at speaking age. I don't know. Maybe I hope the project doesn't take that long. But it's an amazing project. I mean, Tom is a great friend of mine and a very talented and humble person. And so much of this project, it's got himself and his family in it, and like his whole background and upbringing and his ethos and approach to life. But we've spoken about it. We've been having these little discussions along the way, and like, we see it as being something much more than just an architecture documentary or like a house documentary. That it's almost like the architecture of the house is maybe a character, or it's maybe a subplot or something, or it's a vehicle for driving a much broader story, which is more about life or environment or like cities or how people, interpersonal relationships or something, because it's something that's taken many years for them to get onto site. And now there's been all sorts of holdups and delays and dramas on site. They were living across like 5 different locations between the Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast. Tom had jobs in different locations as well. His partner Alex was living in Harvey Bay at one point. They then had a child. Like there's all this. It's like it has all the makings for a dramatic documentary, but it also has like all of the DNA to tell a much bigger story there. Not just like here's a story about a house and following it sequentially.
Do you feel the trap of falling into not necessarily maybe like a grand designs type narrative? Is that something that you're conscious of?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I used to be pretty scathing of grand designs until
you found yourself watching all episodes.
well,
Like, damn it.
I've just had a brain blank. What's the guy's name? The English guy?
Kevin McLeod.
Kevin McLeod. Until I actually learnt about him and what he actually does,
Absolutely.
I was then actually kind of blown away. And I think that the first couple of seasons of the UK Grand Designs I didn't feel like he was pushing back enough. And then I think he did in subsequent episodes. I've never watched the Australian. I think there's a New Zealand version as well. I've never watched it. I kind of got over it. I don't think. I don't know. I think I've probably softened. I think I've probably dropped removed my ego from it a little bit. I don't think that Grand Designs is inherently bad. Like, yes, it's dramatic. It's primetime television. That's what that's for. It's not. It's not meant to be like a chronicle of architectural projects. Like that's not what it is.
That's what I kind of like about what you were saying about it being the architecture being it's an architectural documentary, but the architecture is the backdrop, And I almost feel that film Morris and I don't know if either of you guys have seen it, but incredibly beautiful film. Although it's about them and their practice and architecture, ultimately it's a love film. It's a film about love, and it's incredibly poignant and incredibly emotional. And I think
one of the good architecture films with like an emotional,
like as an architect, like the grief you feel at the end is like palpable. And I feel like as a layperson watching that, you'd be able to sense the love and devotion that they had for each other and their work being architecture. And I feel like that's the type of long format architectural film that isn't about a building, even though it is. It's about something far greater, and that's successful, really successful.
Yeah, it had like a really good 3/4 slump, or a classic movie where something happens and it's like, oh no, buildings, earthquake. And then it's like fight for buildings post earthquake. Some get demolished, some save, and then yay, town hall fixed.
I haven't seen it, so I'm going to have to definitely follow up because it sounds amazing.
It is.
But like absolutely, like this is kind of what I'm getting at with the idea of this documentary, and it's not necessarily something you could do in like a 90-second or even a 3 or 4 minute film, but I guess that is kind of where my head is moving. Is it's like what else is there just beyond documenting the building? Like what other things can we actually be thinking about when we're making these films? And I think that's what a lot of Veeral's work is starting to draw out as well. It's like going beyond just showing spaces or nice bits of furniture, but like what else is there? What other layers can we either overlay or pull out?
I mean, like to add to that, like I've been following another YouTube channel out of the US called Open Space, and they specifically focus on mid-century homes. And it is a joy to watch because it's all about the homeowner's passion for mid-century. It's not pretentious. It's not typical material palette. All these things that you get to see on local project and as living stuff. It's just the true emotion of a person chasing the mid-century dream. And there was one particular episode where one guy was after this Richard Neutra home for 20 years. Right? It took him 20 years to buy this one home, and 6-minute episode, and it was just brilliant.
And that's beyond architecture at that point, isn't it? It's passion, it's love, it's human emotion, and I think that's ultimately what great architecture brings out of people is emotion, be whatever that.
And I sort of feel that if you can bring that sort of emotion out in new architectures with some of your clients, it would be phenomenal, right? Like not to talk about marble and all things like this, superficial things, but why they want a house.
Those productions they're bespoke. They're not the same set of cookie cutter questions and format that they follow on everything. It's like they go to this house, they talk to the person that owns it, and it develops out of that.
Yeah.
Which, I think that's a much more interesting way of making architectural film than, applying the same kind of format to each thing as well.
Yeah, and I even think beyond the interview format, even potentially more powerful is just seeing the visual proof of the change, emotional, the change in lifestyle that architecture has brought upon people, and I think about if Gerard, I don't know if you were there, but like St Hilda's church project here in Wellington, and even though the vicar of this church spoke at the awards a couple of years ago about how much the project had changed his parish, got quite emotional. But you could see, obviously, he was speaking about it, but you could see through him and the people around him the actual change. And even if he'd not said a word, you could have still experienced that. And I feel like that's almost the most powerful thing, is the unspoken influence of architecture.
Yeah. So far, my takeaway from this chat is emotion,
Yeah.
instilling emotion.
Well, I mean, that's what it comes back to, is that architecture is about people ultimately. I mean, I think that there've been movements throughout history where architecture's about the object, and it still can be to some extent. But I mean, ultimately, I think it comes back to people, and I think that's where the interesting stories are, for sure.
Cool. Well, I think that might be a pretty good point to wrap up, guys. And if you got, anything, obviously, I'll chop and screw this a little bit. My editing skills won't be anywhere near as good as yours. But have you guys got anything else you want to end on? I think, Nick, you ended on a pretty key statement there. I think that wrapped things up pretty nicely. But Veeral, anything from you?
We could do a part 3.
I reckon we're just
Should we
getting started, eh?
Should we just start a new podcast?
Yeah, we should.